Day one of the Hearthstone Grandmaster playoffs for the inaugural season here of HSGM continues. My name is Frode, and I'm joined by Simon Welch. I was going to say Wench for a second there by accident.
Wow, jeez. I know we haven't cast together for a while. You don't have to be just throwing shade.
Start
like
at the
right
gate,
off the bat, yeah.
gun blazing. That's right. NA meets EU, not only for playoffs today, but of course for our caster pairs. It's my first time on the desk. In fact, it's my first time casting with Subtle in quite some time. I don't remember the last time we were coming together to join forces.
Korea would be my guess. The
Quite
Korea
possibly.
tour stop last year. Yeah, sounds like it.
Good times in the past and good times abound. Coming up next, we have the elimination match between Seiko and Bunnyhoppor. It's a rematch from the start of the day, Sato, where you were casting. Let's go ahead and break things down for people who weren't tuning in for the first time. Last time, what was happening from your perspective, Sato?
Last time, it was a story of the two decks and the way they were built. Bunny has kind of leaned his primary deck towards Rogue a little bit, but he doesn't have a dedicated secondary or tertiary deck to go towards to be able to counter that strategy. You can see one half-time Scavenger comes into the primary deck, which is an anomaly in terms of primary decks for Mage, and it is that little bit of a nod towards Rogue, but then he's used his entire secondary deck on Warrior and his entire tertiary deck on the Rogue Mirror. Whereas on the other hand, Seiko is packing a little bit of heat dedicated to coming into Mage, and that is really paid out in the opening series for him.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of halftime Scavengers make a one-of appearance on ladder, and it felt like it was a lot more effective there, given that against a wider field where you can expect more aggression, like the Mech Hunter, that's very common, or a Murloc Shaman or Token Druid, halftime Scavenger seems super good to buy you that time for the Cyclone Mage. Is it as important in this matchup where you know that there's only like 2 players you have to effectively prepare for? Maybe not nearly as effective, and we'll see if Bunnyhoppor this time around for the second go could learn any lessons, perhaps even micro decisions that we're not accounting for.
And you can see from Seiko's side, he does have close to what we have been calling the standard anti-mage tech, which is Walk the Plank, Fairy Dragon, and Betrayal. But he's decided to pile an Eviscerate on top of that as well. No copies of Eviscerate in his primary deck. We've often been seeing 1 or 2 of them thrown in from players in the Europe region. But he's choosing to bring one in into the anti-mage strategy, which makes sense to me because it's one of the most flexible cards you can put in there. And if you watch Rogue play out against Mage, sometimes you do just get a ton of pressure and you want to be aggressive and back that up with damage. Sometimes you're a little bit slower and you need to play the removal game against some giants. Well, Eviscerate is one of the few cards that's actually able to do both.
It just makes me a little sad whenever I see rogues, take out some other cards like Ziliax and whatnot. It always makes me feel like it gives that deck so much flexibility, both from the hand and also as a recover option. But it does make sense if he's not playing things like Snip Snap, Ziliax drops in utility, and it's not really that kind of matchup. You're not really trying to rebound and stay alive just barely against mages. You're trying to be aggressive and push them out of the game.
Yeah, I think if you look at point for point mana efficiency in terms of what you can do against Mage, Ziliax just doesn't cut it for 5 most of the time. Like if you're responding with a Ziliax, like what they have done with that equivalent 5 on their side of the board is usually just so much more oppressive. Ziliax just doesn't cut the mustard, so I do like dropping it out for the matchup. And I'm honestly a big fan of the way Seiko's put together his decks in general.
Is that a common saying, cut the mustard?
It's very British, but yes, it's quite common.
Is that what you guys do? we spread it. Apparently you guys slice and dice your condiments.
Thinking about it, yeah, it's incredibly nonsensical, but it's one of those phrases.
I like it. I'm going to use it now a lot of times.
It's one of those phrases that you just use that you've never really thought about where it comes from, but yeah, that is actually nonsense, isn't it?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of mustard in Seiko's hand here, as he basically has 4 pieces of the crazy Mana Cyclone combo, which is cheap spells, Sorcerer's Apprentice, Mana Cyclone, just needs to find the mana expenditure. When you're on the play, how bad is it when you look at the hand that Bunnyhoppor has versus a deck that likes to be on the coin?
Yeah, it's miserable, number one, because you're on the play. You want to be on the coin. But then when you combine that with, not drawing a backstab, not drawing other cheap activators to make stuff happen, that's when it starts to get really messy. And I think we saw this exact kind of game play out in the first series as well.
Yeah, it's brutal. But he does have a proactive game plan in Blink Fox on 3, so at least he has that instead of having to play SI7 Agent for tempo. I found that SI7 is fairly crucial sometimes against Mage.
I've also just noticed Seiko is the rogue player in this matchup, and Bunnyhoppor is the mage player. We have this all the way around.
Yes, we were reading the names according to that. We'll flip that in just a second.
Yep.
What to do?
So it is Bunnyhoppor's turn for clarification. Coin Snip Snap just to get that early game tempo. Many people calling Snip Snap the king of neutral tempo cards, just given that it's flexible and very hard to remove. You can see exactly why. Anything that Seiko plays gets challenged very easily. X-Crow is interesting.
Yeah, it is, in a nutshell, somewhat useful in a rogue deck where you do have, backstabs and Shadow Step available and the option to find, even preps from lackeys in that kind of situation. But in this particular hand, it's just another kind of clunky card that's looking for combo activators that don't exist right now.
Right. Not to mention that sometimes plays directly into your opponent's game plan if they have a cheaper Sea Giant or they have Frost Novas to keep you stalled on board. Snap Bunny with 2 Sorcerer's Apprentice. We've been seeing mages favor to fight back for that tempo early game to make sure that they don't get snowballed on by the rogue. So having 2 Sorcerer's Apprentice does feel a little bit free to use one of them. Looks like he's going to go for the Conjurer's Calling here instead for double 3-drops. Which I don't hate. Something that I was talking a lot with TJ over the course of weeks is that I found that, Conjurer's Calling on 3 is surprisingly effective these days.
It is, yeah, particularly on Snip Snap itself, just because of the extra couple of tokens that you generate can make all the difference. Curiously, I think that is the second time in this exact matchup where Conjurer's Calling on Snip Snap produced Razorfen Hunter plus a 3/4. I think that exactly that happened in the previous series as well. I do think the players that we've seen today going on 3-drops have run above average with the amount of 3/4s in particular that they found. But it's a decent stat pool, and it's just when you're playing for tempo, when you're trying to play card for card, Conjurer's Calling on a 3-drop is very effective a lot of the time.
Yeah, 3/4s just seem to be dished out in spades. Meanwhile, we're trying to find reasonably stated 2-mana minions.
I know.
A lot of times we're just like, this is a 3/2. I guess we'll just play it.
Yep.
So Bunnyhoppor now has the opportunity to go for those big combos we were talking about. Finds his magic trick. I don't know how useful Spellbender is against Rogue these days, given that, Seiko does have a sap and a backstab, but it looks like he's just going to wash instead. Gets a Kona Cold off the Tone of Intellect.
Yeah, the tone made sense there to me. Nothing particularly effective. Just take the free spell, give you a chance to re-roll for Elemental Evocation, for Arcane Intellect, for whatever it was going to be off the tone.
Yep, so this should be the 4th spell thrown into the Mana Cyclone pool, so Bunnyhoppor should be able to play his Chief Giant if he draws next turn.
Runs out on me.
Another Tome of Intellect. Crossbow, very useful card. A lot of combat tricks. Stall, AoE, single target removal, or basically tempo cards. Bunnyhoppor got a decent pool. Now Seiko, once again, what we're talking about, fighting from behind.
Yeah, and worth noting that with the primary deck, he's not particularly well equipped to do that. It's something that the Rogue is able to do more effectively when it switches over to the secondary or tertiary that's teched against Mage. Whereas this is a much more tempo-focused build of the deck that really wants to be ahead, and if it falls behind, it has to just be by a small amount where, for example, Evil Miscreant and Lackeys can catch you back up onto the board.
Yep. That Sorcerer's Apprentice is a high priority target removal.
This guy's toast.
Seiko can clear it off with the bounce in return using the SI7 agent.
Jeez. This is still such an ugly turn, though. It's one of the most clunky rogue draws that I've seen. I've seen rogue draws, obviously, that are just full of air, where just everything is unplayable. This has just been an awkward, just 1 card per turn kind of hand, which is in no way what rogue wants to be doing. You can... It's kind of self-evident. The class is built around combo. They have that as a keyword. They want to be doing multiple things per turn.
What to do?
Right, and at the very least, utilizing all their mana crystals. In this case, Seiko forced to play from behind, and now Bunny, can he capitalize on that? Surprisingly, not that many options, given that he has more of a reactive hand than a proactive one, but still has a pretty decent option to set up for his future turns. This is kind of a really crucial point. You kind of mentioned at 5 mana, this is where it starts to become a really scary turning point for the Mage.
Yes. It's interesting because I'm kind of thinking about that sort of same Ziliax dynamic I was talking about, where Ziliax for 5 here, it looks perfect, it kills the 3/3, but I'm wondering whether Bunny like wants to draw cards here instead and then just use the Frostbolt just so he gets closer, quicker to those big explosive turns he's going to be looking for with the Giants and whatever else. Does choose to go with the Ziliax though, like I said, makes sense. Kills the 3/3, it costs 5, let's get it done.
Yeah, getting the mana out of the way is fairly important too, and you know, it's reasonable pressure. 5 damage on the boards. Seiko's been using his life total a lot to trade. He's not exactly a deck that gains a lot of life.
Right.
So he finds the Vendetta, which allows him to tempo a little bit more against his opponent. Is this a Vexcrow setup?
I was just about to utter those very same words, Daniel.
Oh, I haven't been called Daniel in a long time.
I don't know why I did that.
It's basically my mother and Sottle.
But good company then.
Great company. The best.
The problem is, like, what is your sap target here if you're going for a Vexcrow turn, right? Like, are you sapping your opponent's Ziliax? That doesn't seem fun.
I mean, is it worth sapping a 1/1 Microbot? Maybe not. Seems like a decent turn to also set up Shark if he's already committed to the Vendetta pre-Vexcrow.
Sure.
And it makes sense given that it seems like Bunnyhoppor had a slow turn. I mean, he had free development on a board with almost a full hand. I mean, granted, half of them were randomly generated spells, but maybe Seiko is trying to preemptively get ahead of Bunnyhoppor. If he does end up drawing a lot of cards and developing big stuff with a huge development,
right,
he can respond back with Shark combos. Of course, we know he doesn't really have those cards in hand. No Miscreant.
This is kind of what I wondered about on the previous turn, because now Bunny has the ability to Arcane Intellect. I guess if he AIs here and he draws the Giant, it ends up costing 3 anyway, right? So he would still be able to play it. So I guess there isn't too much opportunity lost with the way he did it. It kind of starts to make more sense to me.
Jeez. 3 Frost Novas, a Cone of Cold, an Arcane Explosion, and Ice Bears.
Job done.
It is essentially just become the Freeze Mage deck.
Yep.
Oh gosh, both hands looking kind of awkward here. Can first test for Splitting Image with its attack on the 1/1 Microbot. This test for Mirror Entity. This is a fairly nice setup though from Seiko. It does have 6/6 Edwin, which will force Bunnyhoppor to react to.
You say force, but, you know.
I mean, 9 power when your opponent plays a Leroy deck is still fairly scary.
Right.
Given that Bunnyhoppor is at 24. But the Ice Barrier does make him feel a lot more
Exactly. Yeah, he's at functional 32 right now, and he's at functional 32 with, you know, potentially 4 full board freezes as well if he gets a full freeze out of that Cone of Cold. The scary part is the Spirit of the Shark, which is another thing you have to weigh into the Ziliax equation as well. Often, Ziliax is your most effective answer to Spirit of the Shark in the matchup.
What to do? What to do?
Yeah, I do kind of want to remove the Spirit of the Shark. And granted that my opponent just gained 6 life again, I don't know if like holding on to Frostbolt for any big combo
Time runs out on me.
apologies there. For any combo to finish the game seems very viable. Because the only way to remove it, from what I see, would be to either double AoE or to use Frostbolt here. Letting it live. Okay, he's gonna Frostbolt.
He's going to do both, yeah. I was thinking about, you could give it 1 turn, right? If you just pinged it down to 1 that turn, then you have a pretty effective way to deal with it next turn.
Right.
Be it ping or Arcane Explosion. But yeah, it's a Spirit of the Shark. Those things are scary. Just get them dealt with.
Yeah, if they find some kind of lackey generation and then evolve it twice, you're like, wow, I wish I just killed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now this is a lot of stats, but still 3 freezes, and finally a minion that Bunnyhoppor can invest into. The Halftime Scavenger, the 1-of copy in his primary deck. So his main way to stall is the Frost Nova.
It is, but even with 3 of them, you still feel bad just kind of Frost Nova plus no progress, right? Like if that's your turn, you always feel like you could have done something better.
Sure. So then, do you think instead he utilizes, say, mirror image?
I was considering the mirror image line as well. Yeah, it's something where a Ray of Frost really like kind of solves this turn, blows this game wide open. I don't know how greedy I'm getting here. He's got 3 Frost Novas in his hand. I'm saying, oh, if he had a Ray of Frost as well, like this would be super easy. But you know, TJ was talking about this in the previous series, where you know, even with so many available, you've got to really think about stretching them out. And he made a great point, philosophical point that I kind of agree with. Where one of the first things I look at against Rogue is, can I play this turn without Frost Nova? In which case, I will do so and save them for later.
Right. I mean, Frost Nova just usually increases in power the later the game goes too. Right. Your opponent's game plans are more developed and they try to go for these giant swings and game-ending damage. Yep. And Frost Nova essentially buys you a turn. And in the late stage of the game, both players will be just counting down, right? Trying to set up a 2-turn, 3-turn lethal, and if you could delay it for longer, you might get the final checkmate in that battle for position. Seiko picks up Leroy Jenkins. So not really too much going on. And, you know, one of the biggest things that makes Halftime Scavenger so scary and a formidable force to be reckoned with is the fact that it has stealth, and Seiko has no way to actually target anything here.
Yeah, I think with the turn that he made, I think there is still a lot of upside to the way he used this Frost Nova. You know, I use the phrase no progress. I think that's one of the great things about Halftime Scavenger and why it's so effective against Rogue is that it's a minion you can stick always, and that's fantastic. And if you're sticking a minion as mage, then that counts as progress. The full board freeze with the Frost Nova also goes some way as to preserving the mystery of this secret by preventing any face attacks whatsoever. So it's still like Vaporize or Ice Barrier in Seiko's mind, with potentially some other outsiders as well. So it definitely did have a lot of merit to it, and I think, you know, talking about that line of saying, well, can I play this turn without using Frost Nova? I think the answer was no, that turn for Bunnyhoppor, so it made sense for him to go down that line.
Well, Bunnyhoppor does have some pretty big development opportunities here with the Conjurer's Calling and Frost Nova combination and stacking the bananas. And this might just be like a good old-fashioned freeze mage type setup where Bunnyhoppor can keep chain freezing and attacking Seiko's life total, and there's not much that he can do about it given that he doesn't have any way to silence the minions.
Well, I'm not sure whether he goes bananas this turn, or rather, like, doubles up on the Conjurer's Calling instead.
That's fair. Thing is, Banana Buffoon also gives you stats, kind of like, and if you get the low end of the 4-mana spectrum, which is 2 attack, it feels fairly similar. I do like using 1 Conjurer's Calling here. Oh my goodness! Finds a Kor'kron Elite to double dip in the damage, Banana Buffoon.
Oh, that was the second copy anyway. My mistake. Conjurer's Calling's gone. That was the twin spell version.
That's right. Also finds the Archer, which I believe is if Bunnyhoppor equips a weapon.
No, that's drawing the 1-drop minions thing.
Oh, you're right, you're right. Whenever you play 1-drop
minion, draw a spell. Yeah.
Very nuanced, specific card that doesn't really have any application here. Seiko picks up Waggle Pick. And the awkward thing, too, is that with the spells that he plays, it's also going to increase his board size, which makes it difficult for the 3rd Frost Nova to allow him to do anything.
I wonder.
It's very true. Most importantly, he's just staring down 12 right now and knows that there's 2 bananas to back that up immediately. Gargoyle not doing anything. There are, of course, random outs from random 2-drops here that could change the equation for Bunnyhoppor.
Sure. Thanatos might not look anything impressive right now. It does have uses for its card draw, but can't draw cards if it's frozen.
Yep.
6, 7, 8, 9 damage this turn. Bunnyhoppor has Frost Nova. There's nothing Seiko can do. He has a 2-turn lethal. Gonna go for the magic trick just in case. Doesn't really need that second evocation. Splitting Image is fun as a disruption tool, I guess. It makes Seiko kind of, I guess, think about stuff. But with
Yeah.
a full board, he doesn't really have many options anyways.
Right. I feel like it's probably the best card of the
I
three for
wonder.
just making sure you secure this lethal, right? Even if you just play it here and you get a second 0-2 taunt, it makes it as hard as possible for your minions to die.
Right. Third Frost Nova and the double banana means that Seiko has to kill off the board.
Well, he has a waggle pick equipped, so he does get to pick up something immediately at the start of the turn to create space.
Runs
You're right.
out on me.
Which, you know, with a couple of life drinkers on the board,
Yeah, which actually does make me think about that splitting image again. I don't think he had enough mana though.
One shot. Three
sure. Yeah,
hits.
okay, if he's redeveloping the Fletcher, then yeah, this makes sense.
High Spirit Togwaggle, no lackey. Attack with the waggle pick. Balances the Vex Crow.
So he now has to trade Leroy to stay alive? Yep.
That's right. Leroy will kill off the 6/5. There's 5, 6, 7, 8 damage on Bunnyhopper's side. Seiko's not dead.
Which, yeah, looking at it more, Bunny was absolutely right just to take the best removal option that he was offered from that magic trick, because this is the situation he was foreseeing where his lethal just wasn't secure enough, so he had to look for a way to potentially stop damage coming back the other way if he needed to.
Right. Assuming he doesn't get some kind of lethal here from the Conjurer's Calling.
Yep, Corcoran again.
Yep. There's also Stormwind Champion as a charge minion.
What
Yep.
to do?
5, 6, 7,
What to
8, yeah, and he
do?
does need the 2. He's gonna rip it.
Finds a Mega Defender and the Ticket Scalper. So now Bunnyhoppor could end up just clearing off a little bit of the board if he just wants to chill with his existing board in this spot.
I feel like Conjurer's Calling goes again. On the 3-drop can still find Wolf Riders, it can still find Raid Leader, which puts his extra damage as well. Both of those were lethal in that position.
That's fair. And now with the double Arcane Explosion, like he said, the foresight to be able to recognize this. Very important for Bunnyhoppor now that we see it pan out.
I'm a big fan of just about everything that happened that turn, I think. Yeah, it was a very well-played turn of Hearthstone.
Yeah, it was a good setup into it as well.
Right.
That led into that play. Seiko picks up Shadow Step. So no lackeys to really make that huge swing for the High Spirit Togwaggle, unfortunately. He could end up resetting one of his bigger minions there, though.
Yes. And can stay alive, just based on what we can see, just with a couple of trades in the Vendetta, and as you said, allows him to Shadow Step and replay an Edwin in that world as well, but it only comes down as a 6/6 again anyway.
I'll take it. I think right now Seiko just wants to stay alive.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
I guess that makes sense, given that it's just the best tempo on the board. Seiko sees that it's Ice Barrier. Bunnyhoppor basically at full life, but Bunnyhopper's also out of gas. Oh, no! And now it becomes a question for Bunnyhoppor. How does he address this board state? Does he let the Sea Giant live, for example? To push damage? Was there an opportunity to push damage before to set up a 2-turn lethal
What
this
to
turn?
do? What to do?
There was. I mean, these are all questions going through Bunnyhopper's mind.
I feel like he spent the last 2 turns maximizing damage as best he could, right? I guess he traded some whelps in on the previous turn.
Yeah.
The Arcane Explosion. Okay, sure. But yeah, this turn, I think the 8-2 has to die, right? Like, if you go face, put your opponent on
What
a
to
2-turn
do?
clock, they've
What
got
to
you on a
do?
2-turn clock right back with that 8-2 still in play.
Right, and then Bunnyhoppor still has ways to draw into lethal if he picks up Archmage Antonites and utilizes the evocation to convert into Fireball, but it won't be immediate.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of immediacy, the more I look at it, this Togwaggle tempo play actually makes a lot of sense to me. It gets an additional 5/5 on the board now, and then even if like the Lackey draw comes off the top, that's what he's using the Shadow Step for instead of trying to recycle the Edwin Bank.
Right. It's really it's a really clever setup here from Seiko. Okay.
All right.
Sure.
There's upside for holding the Shadow Step as well.
Oh.
Okay, this game has just turned around very, very rapidly. Now what?
Well, I mean, he still can get the treasure, but he does also kind of want to fight for tempo. You can't play the treasure this turn, but he still gets it for the following turn to plan around it.
Now, I'm not sure, Dan, if you're aware of this, of Admirable's favorite Seiko narrative, which is that he always Shadow Steps Novice Engineers and somehow ends up winning the game. I guarantee you backstage somewhere, Admirable was freaking out going, I guarantee you he Shadow Steps that Novice Engineer this turn.
He does it all the time in our practice matches.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And he's very proud of it.
He's very proud of it.
And we're all very proud of him,
yeah.
to be fair. So now, again, an opportunity for Seiko to potentially just push Bunnyhoppor slowly, turn after turn. There's 8 damage represented, plus the 9th of the dagger, so he's not dead in 3 turns. Or 2.5, rather.
Boy, this is some air for Bunny, though.
I did want to ask if there's any merit from Seiko to pick the goblet in the previous turn. Given that his hand is just completely empty. But I understand the Wondrous Wand, he just wants to close it out with tempo. But, I mean, just one of the things to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I've honestly, apart from like very, very early on when Togwaggle came out and I just picked each one a few times just to kind of get a feel for what they did, I've only really picked Goblet when playing Pogo Rogue, at which point, like, sometimes you've engineered a situation where like you've gone Myras, you put Pogos back in your deck, and then you just Goblet and the game ends. Aside from that, like I struggle to see the upside to it.
I mean, it still looks fairly good for this wand to fill up the hand anyways with the shark play. Picks a card that I can't recognize. Oh, it's Deadly Shot. It's the new art, of course, from the recent patch. A wave of cards have been changed, so if you guys don't recognize that card art immediately, just check out some of the stuff in your collection that you already have, most likely. Mind Control is also very funny to me because of a way to stop Bunnyhoppor from just playing like a giant, and you can answer it and start threatening 2-turn lethal.
I was kind of interested in that Mind Control for that exact same reason. There it is! Shadow Step that Novice Engineer. Because as you said, Bunny clearly has a dead hand. So there are worlds where he draws one big minion and he plays that one big minion, right? He's kind of forced to.
I mean, it makes sense given that Seiko has 6 cards left in his deck. He just picks up like all the core cards that he's needed for the majority of the game.
Right.
And now Bunny still has an ability to stall, and he has one more turn. Sea Giant isn't it, and I think with this pan out, Bunnyhoppor, I think, might just get muscled out here. Because the Sea Giant is just going to be used to gain health. There is also one final possibility that Bunnyhoppor is able to find a Mana Cyclone and get a couple of free spells.
Yes.
I mean, he has the opportunity to like double evocation, get Pyroblast, like that kind of setup.
Yep. Fireball, Pyroblast. A ping to face adds the out of Frostbolt to that as well, which is kind of interesting.
I mean, this Deadly Shot is pretty godlike in this position. Just shuts down the 8/8. The question is if Seiko wants to do anything else.
But mind controlling it is funnier, Dan.
It is. It's way funnier, actually. Given that some that Bunnyhoppor can't really account for whatsoever. Oh,
okay.
Faceless Lackey is not going to be that great, but he can use the Witchy Lackey, at least. Oh, doesn't have enough mana after his Hinge Clamp.
Yeah, it's a Burglar instead. Soul of the Forest.
Desperate measures. Extra arms. Bunch of like pretty decent cards, but nothing that he really needs. Extra Arms is probably the most power that he can add, but in terms of the cheap cost, chooses Desperate Measures.
Right.
Choose soon.
I still get a kick that when you charge gives a minion rush, basically. Can't attack the heroes this turn. Something that Seiko doesn't really have to utilize in this position. Mark of the Wild makes sense, given if Bunnyhoppor has a development plus freeze, gives him the ability to stall.
And that was a pretty savage 3 or 4 draws in a row for Bunnyhoppor. The two hands essentially just paired down and eliminated each other, which is often a scenario where the mage finds itself comfortable being, because on average they draw very powerful things off the top of their deck, or sometimes they just have a Luna in their hand and then they just pop off and draw their entire deck from that point. You know, if the game reaches that stalemate situation, it's usually a position where the mage feels quite comfortable. But in that case, it was Seiko with actually some very clever engineering of his last couple of resources that put himself in a really nice spot.
Yeah, the Heist Baron Tawaggle play over just what looked like to be a conventional value play to restore the health on your Edwin Van Cleef seemed really good. And now we're kind of like sweating a little bit if you're in Bunnyhoppor's camp, because Seiko now has improved his deck, theoretically speaking, by having the Fairy Dragon, Walk the Plank, Betrayal, and Viscera.